The moment Marcus Hale lowered the excavator bucket, Echo, usually calm, as tidewater exploded into frantic barking, hurling himself between the machine and the old tidal berm. Cold morning fog curled around them, carrying a strange metallic smell Marcus had never noticed before. "Echo back," he shouted, but the dog dug harder, claws tearing through wet sand as if warning him off something alive beneath it. Then Marcus felt a faint tremor rising through the ground, like a buried engine waking up. He jammed the shovel down to see what Echo feared. The instant metal rang, something below rang back. Marcus swept the mud aside with his glove breath misting in the cold, as Echo paced tight circles around him. The dog's hackles stood like bristled wire, every muscle locked toward that thin ring of metal now exposed in the sand. The fog thickened, rolling in low from the bay, muffling distant gulls, until the world shrank to three things: Marcus, Echo, and that buried shape. A hatch steel old far too thick for anything civilian hid beneath a layer of tidal silt. Marcus brushed harder. A faded emblem surfaced, an angular trident stamped in chipped blue paint. Echo whimpered, backing up as if the air around the symbol had turned electric. The tremor came again, stronger, this time shivering up through Marcus's boots. Not the tide, not a boat, something deeper. He reached for the rusted wheel set into the hatch, meaning only to test it. Echo lunged, barking so violently spit flew from his jaws, blocking his hand with his whole body. "Hey, what has you this rattled?" Marcus whispered. Echo's eyes didn't leave the hatch. And in that charged silence, Marcus finally wondered, what if Echo wasn't warning him about what he might open, but what might already be awake beneath them? The fog didn't lift so much as slide sideways, peeling away in thin ribbons as the sun climbed higher. By the time Marcus and Echo trudged back across the marsh flats, the waterline was already beginning its slow return, filling shallow pools with shimmering mirrors. Marcus walked with the shovel in one hand, the ghost of that metallic vibration still echoing in his bones. Echo stayed glued to his hip close enough that Marcus could feel the dog's breath on his pant. Echo didn't look back. The dog's gaze was pinned forward, watchful, scanning the marsh with quick, sharp movements of his ears. Whatever had the path home cut across the top of the tidal marsh, a narrow boardwalk weathered to silvery gray. Marcus's boots thumped gently on the planks, an old familiar rhythm he had walked since he was a kid. The air smelled of seaweed and cold salt with a feint. They reached the edge of the marsh and climbed onto firmer ground. His property stretched out ahead of him, a crooked gravel drive, a weather-beaten farmhouse with peeling white paint, and a cluster of outbuildings that tilted like old men in a storm. Even from a distance, the bait shack looked tired. The porch roof's Marcus Stowe Echo stopped with H, the "You're reading me" Echo. Inside, the far Marcus took. He grabbed his. "Not right now," he murmured, sliding the tablet aside. Echo's ears twitched. Marcus forced a smile. "Coffee," he said to the dog. "We start with coffee." While the old drip machine sputtered, Marcus leaned both hands on the counter and let the steam warm his face. He closed his eyes and counted his breath slow, steady the way his therapist insisted. Echo padded quietly over and pressed against his leg, grounding him without being asked. "Good boy," Marcus whispered. A sharp alert chimed on the tablet. He flinched despite himself. The bank again. He tapped the message open, bracing for the familiar language. "We regret to inform you. Delinquent status. Review required. Foreclosure timeline." He closed it without reading the rest. Marcus set his coffee aside untouched and walked to the living room windows. The marsh was turning bright under the rising sunwater, beginning to pool in the low places. From here he couldn't see the hatch, couldn't see Echo's frantic digging, couldn't see the emblem or the wheel, but he felt the same pull he always felt when he didn't want to think about something, the instinct to freeze, to compartmentalize, to tell himself it was nothing. Except Echo didn't treat it like nothing. The dog's reaction, it was wrong. Not a snake warning, not territorial, not fear. Something else. Something more like guarding. He rubbed his face hard, then grabbed his jacket. "Come on, Echo," he said. "Let's check the tanks." Echo rose instantly. The clam tanks sat under a faded red shed roof near the back of the property. Their pumps thrummed softly, recycling seawater Marcus hauled in by boat. The air smelled of brine, damp rope, and wet wood. It was a familiar smell, comforting even. He'd grown up on this scent, running these same paths with bare feet and sunburnt shoulders back when the farm belonged to his parents and the land felt simpler. He lifted a tank lid. Oxygen levels were low. Not dangerously so, not yet, but lower than they should have been after a pump cycle. He adjusted the valve and frowned. "This storm season's going to crush us," he muttered. Echo sniffed along the tanks, then sat beside him, watching Marcus's hands move. The dog wasn't anxious now, just alert in the way he usually was, in wide-open spaces. No strange vibrations here. No digging. No panic. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Marcus locked the shed and walked back toward the farmhouse, Echo at his heel. As they approached the porch steps, a gust of wind rattled the loose gutter over the door. Marcus looked up automatically. The metal swung on one rusted screw and tapped against the siding steady, tap, tap, tap. A harmless rhythm. Yet it made him tense. He blew out a breath and shook his head. "Get a grip," he muttered. Echo gave a soft, sympathetic chuff. Inside, Marcus grabbed his phone and tapped the contact for his VA therapist. A voicemail this early. Good. He wasn't in the mood for real-time conversation. "Hey, morning," he said awkwardly, when the tone beeped. "Checking in like you asked. Bad sleep. Not a great morning. I'll log it." He hesitated, glancing at Echo. "The dog's fine. He's active today. Anyway, I'll call next week." He hung up too quickly. Echo looked up at him expectantly. "Don't give me that look," Marcus said. "I called." The phone buzzed immediately. Not the therapist. Sheriff Valdez. Marcus let the call sit. He didn't need the sheriff asking if he'd seen anything unusual out there. The man cared, sure, but in the small-town, quiet, worry way that made Marcus feel observed. Broken. Fragile. He didn't need that gaze. Not today. A knock sounded on the front door. Echo growled, not a deep threat growl, but a low, unknown contact warning. Marcus opened the curtain an inch. Opal Jennings stood on the porch, bundled in a blue windbreaker gray hair tucked into a knit hat. She held a thermos and a paper bag, and her smile, small but steady, cut through some of the tension in Marcus's chest. He opened the door. "You're up early." "I heard the excavator," Opal said lightly, stepping inside. "Figured you hadn't eaten." Echo greeted her with a wag, slow, respectful, familiar. She scratched his cheek. "You taking care of him today?" she asked the dog. Echo leaned into her hand. Opal looked back at Marcus, her eyes soft but sharp in the way nurses' eyes often were. "You're pale," she noted, "and your hands are shaking." Marcus hid them in his jacket pockets. "Cold morning." Her voice said she didn't believe him, but she didn't push. She set the bag on the table. "Blueberry muffins. I used real sugar, not that low-cal nonsense." Despite himself, Marcus smiled. Opal poured coffee into a mug. "You look like you needed a little sweetness." "Lot of sweetness," he said. "Thanks." She studied him for a quiet moment. "You were down at the berm, yeah." "Why, today?" he shrugged. "Trying to clear out space. Might expand the flats before he stopped. Before the season hits." Opal raised an eyebrow. "Before the bank hits, you mean?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "You've been talking to people. Everyone talks in this town," she said gently. "Very few actually listen." She tapped the table. "Tell me what's bothering you." "Not much to tell." "Then tell me the not much." Marcus exhaled slowly. He wasn't about to mention the hatch. Not until he understood what he'd found. Not until he understood Echo's reaction. And not until he was certain it wasn't some decaying Cold War junk he was overreacting to. But Opal's steady presence was an anchor he didn't expect to need today. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Echo freaked out on me. When I was digging." Opal's eyes sharpened. "A seizure, no." Marcus looked at the dog. He wasn't afraid. He was blocking me. Echo, as if hearing his name in a tone that meant work, padded over and sat beside Marcus's chair. Opal watched expression shifting from concern to something else thoughtful. "Animals feel things we don't," she said quietly. "Vibrations, gas pockets, pressure changes." Marcus nodded slowly. There was a tremor. Felt like a generator. Opal stiffened just slightly, so slightly most people wouldn't notice. Odd place for machinery. Yeah. She hesitated, then reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded newspaper clipping. "This came up when I went through my husband's things," she said. "Figured it might interest you." Marcus unfolded it. A decades-old article about low-frequency sonar tests conducted by a local research facility. Part science, part speculation, and one quote from a fisherman complaining that something offshore felt like it rattled my bones. There was no facility name printed. Just a location marker on a map, roughly the same marsh where Marcus found the hatch. Echo whined softly, tapping a paw against Marcus's boot as if urging him to keep moving, not sink into the worry creeping up behind his ribs. Opal noticed. "That dog knows more than either of us," she said softly. "Yeah," Marcus whispered. "He does." Outside wind brushed the side of the house, rattling the old gutter again. Echo's ears tilted toward the sound, not alarmed, just tracking patterns like he always did. Opal finished her coffee and pulled on her gloves. "If you're doing anything else with that excavator, don't do it alone. I'm fine, Marcus said too quickly. You're many things, Opal said, holding his gaze, but fine rarely means safe. She stepped toward the door, then paused. Your father used to get that same look when he came home from night shifts at that lab. Same fog in the eyes, same heaviness. Marcus swallowed. He never talked about that job. No, Opal said softly. He didn't. When she left the house, felt too quiet. Echo sat by the window tail curled around his paws, watching Opal's car rumble down the gravel road. Marcus stood behind him, hands braced on the back of a chair, feeling the old house breathe around him. He wasn't imagining it. Something had shifted this morning. Something real. Something Echo had sensed before he did. Okay, Marcus said into the stillness. Let's take a walk. Echo sprang to his feet. They stepped outside, together boots, sinking into damp earth, the marsh shimmering in the distance. The day was brightening, but the air felt heavier with every step, like the tide wasn't the only thing rising. As they walked toward the shed, a gust pushed across the flats, carrying the faintest thread of that same metallic scent. Echo stopped cold. Marcus did too. The dog's ears angled toward the marsh, not in fear, not curiosity, recognition. A soft vibration pulsed under Marcus's boots, barely there, but Echo felt it first. He always did. Marcus steadied himself against the shed wall, breath shallow. Something was alive beneath his land. And for the first time that morning, maybe for the first time in years, Marcus Hale realized he wasn't just trying to save his farm. He might have to save himself, or lose everything that still mattered, before the tide or whatever lay under it came back. By late afternoon, the tide had receded again, pulling long ribbons of foam back toward the open bay. The marsh glistened in muted gold under a thin, low sunday. Marcus stood at the edge of the flats with Echo beside him, staring at the distant berm where the hatch lay hidden under a fresh wash of silt and seaweed. Every instinct told him to leave it alone. Every bill, every foreclosure notice, every rattled memory told him he couldn't. Quick in, quick out, Marcus murmured, adjusting the pry bar strapped across his back. You stay close this time. Echo didn't move. The dog's stance was tight-angled, not toward the berm, but toward something deeper, as if listening under the wind. Marcus hesitated. You're spooking me, bud. Echo finally stepped forward. That was enough. They crossed the flats together, boots and paws sinking into wet sand that released tiny bubbles with each step. The air grew colder. As they neared the berm, and the faint metallic tang Marcus tasted earlier returned like a ghost at the edge of breath. When they reached the spot, Echo immediately lowered his head and pressed his nose to the ground. He sniffed once, twice, then backed away sharply, tail dropping. Yeah, Marcus whispered. I feel it too. He knelt, scraping away the thin layer of new silt, exposing the circular outline of the hatch once more. The cold steel seemed unaffected by the tide, as though the water refused to claim it. Marcus wiped the emblem, the chipped trident, until it gleamed dully in the afternoon light. Just a look, he said under his breath. Just a look. Echo rumbled a low warning. Marcus braced his boots in the mud, gripped the rusted wheel at the center, and pulled. It groaned, fighting him. He shifted his weight, applying slow, measured force marine EOD muscle memory, taking over. Half an inch. Another inch. A final grinding snap. The wheel spun, releasing a thin hiss of stale air. Echo backed up fast, tail tucked, ears flat. Marcus coughed as a metallic chemical odor seeped out sharp enough to sting his nostrils. Old lab smell, he muttered. Probably just oxidized. Then the ground trembled again, not from outside, from underneath. Echo barked once, sharp, urgent, and shoved his head under Marcus's elbow, trying to force him backward. Marcus pushed through. Hey, easy, I'm fine. He wasn't sure he was. Marcus wedged the pry bar under the hatch's handle and levered upward. The lid lifted with a scream of rust, revealing a black square descending into a shaft. A metal ladder glinted faintly in the shadows. Below, the air felt colder, almost refrigerated. He aimed his flashlight down. The beam vanished into stillness. Look shallow, he whispered. Echo whined a desperate pleading note that made Marcus pause. He rested a hand on the dog's head. Stay here. Guard. Echo didn't sit. He pressed forward instead, pacing tight arcs at the lip of the opening as if trying to physically block Marcus from going down. Marcus exhaled. I'm just checking. Then we cover it, and this whole mess goes away. He knew Echo didn't believe that. He wasn't sure he did either. Still, he clipped the flashlight to his jacket, gripped the ladder, and lowered himself slowly. The metal was slippery with condensation. 10 feet down, the smell intensified, chemical, stale, wrong. His chest tightened. Not fear. Not yet. Just a memory rising like steam. The tunnel. The dust. The light gone dead. The weight of rock shifting above. No, he muttered. Not now. He kept moving. His boots touched solid concrete. He swept the flashlight across the small chamber. Steel walls, flaking paint, a narrow corridor stretching deeper, a power panel humming faintly still alive after all these years. And there, half-toppled on a rusted workbench, sat a stack of waterproof field binders. Marcus's stomach clenched. He approached slowly. The binders were labeled in crisp block letters: Siren Deep Tide Zone Trials, Siren Deep Bay Logs, Restricted Siren Deep Anomaly Reports. The last label made his skin crawl. He lifted a binder, and Echo barked overhead, frantic scrambling at the hatch rim. "Almost done," Marcus called. Echo's claws scraped metal, a sound thin and sharp in the shaft. Marcus flipped the binder open. Handwritten notes filled each page in neat, familiar strokes. His breathing stopped. His father's handwriting. The flashlight beam shook as Marcus turned page after page. Title chart, cross-references, notations about low-frequency pulses, recorded tremor patterns, handwritten warnings, unstable, recommend immediate halt, toxicity and sediment samples. If they order another trial, I'm reporting directly. Marcus swallowed hard. His vision narrowed. 5 words burned into the paper like brand marks, something listening under the bay. Echo barked again, higher, sharper. "Okay. We're leaving," Marcus whispered. He grabbed 3 binders and a small tape recorder, half buried under dust. When he turned toward the ladder, a vibration shivered through the soles of his boots. Then a sound rose low, resonant, almost subsonic. Not mechanical, not natural. A frequency. A pulse. Marcus froze, chest tightening, as the hum deepened into something bone deep. The corridor lights flickered. Dust rained from the ceiling. For a split second, he wasn't in a Cold War vault. He was back in a collapsed tunnel overseas. Lungs, burning ears, ringing body, shaking against the weight of earth overhead. "No, no, not here," he whispered. Echo's paws hammered the hatch rim. The dog barked in a desperate rhythm, anchoring him, forcing him to breathe. Marcus clutched the ladder with both hands, eyes shut, grounding himself the way his therapist taught. In, 4, hold, 2, out, 6. "Not dying in a hole," he said through clenched teeth. He climbed fast, one rung, then another, binders banging against his chest. Halfway up, another tremor hit stronger, rattling the ladder. Marcus gritted his teeth and kept going. Echo's face appeared at the rim, eyes wide, tongue flicking with anxious breaths. "Move," Marcus gasped. Echo backed up just enough for Marcus to haul himself onto the marsh. He rolled over onto his back, staring at the gray sky, while Echo climbed onto his chest and pushed his weight down, panting into Marcus's neck. "I'm okay," Marcus rasped, gripping the dog's shoulders. "I'm okay." Echo didn't move until Marcus's pulse steadied. Only then did the dog step back, eyes locked on the hatch as if expecting something to follow. Marcus forced the rusted lid shut and jammed rocks across the top. He lifted the binders with trembling hands, careful not to let Echo see how badly they shook. "Let's go," he whispered. Echo didn't need telling twice. By the time they reached the farmhouse, the sky had dimmed into early twilight. The wind pushed harder across the marsh, carrying the sharp cry of gulls and something else, something hollow, like a low moan buried under the tide. Marcus didn't look back. Inside, he spread the binders on the kitchen table. Echo circled once, then planted himself at the back door facing the marsh. "Something listening under the bay," Marcus whispered, tracing the words his father wrote. His hands shook again, but this time Echo didn't come to ground him. The dog was too busy watching the dark windows. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Local area code. He didn't answer. A voicemail popped up seconds later. He hit play. A woman's voice, smooth, professional, too calm for the hour. "Mr. Hale, this is Coastal Hazards Authority. We received a report of unauthorized excavation near your marsh boundary this morning. We'll be stopping by shortly to ensure compliance." Marcus's blood chilled. He hadn't filed anything. No one had been out there. No neighbors had seen him. Echo growled low, deep enough that every hair on Marcus's arms rose. The voice continued, "We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Hale. Stay put." The message ended. Marcus looked at Echo. Echo stared back. And for the first time since the hatch opened, Marcus understood something with stark, icy clarity. Whatever had been buried under his land wasn't the only thing that had just woken up. Someone else had been listening too. The last of the light slipped behind the low ridge, leaving the marsh washed in iron-gray shadow. Marcus locked the door, slid the kitchen deadbolt into place, and stood still until he felt Echo brush his leg. The dog's breathing was fast, not panicked, but focused the way he got when he scented something Marcus couldn't. Still watching the windows, Marcus whispered, Echo didn't look away from the dark glass. A faint vibration rattled the mugs hanging above the sink. Marcus turned sharply, thinking it was his imagination, but a soft clink echoed again, rhythmic, almost polite. Not seismic, not tied. The same frequency he'd felt under the bay. That scent, cold metal drifting across the marsh seemed to seep through the weather stripping, sliding under the door like smoke. Marcus stepped closer to Echo. There's no one out there, but Echo was rigid, tail dropped, ears pinned, not terrified, alert, listening. A steadying breath didn't help. Marcus's pulse had climbed into his throat. He flicked off the kitchen light so the window became a mirror. The marsh outside was a silhouette of reeds and black water. Nothing moved, but the ground hummed. A low, subtle pulse rippled beneath the soil, felt through the floorboards rather than heard. Echo whined, not in fear, but in the strange vibrational distress he only showed during thunderstorms. Skill, showcase Hasson, frequency response. Echo padded toward the back door, pressed his chest into Marcus's leg and leaned hard, guiding him away from the windows. A trained grounding move, but with a twist. Echo wasn't grounding Marcus this time. He was positioning him. Okay, Marcus murmured. What am I not hearing? The hum stopped, instantly. Echo snapped his gaze toward the far marsh. His entire body's stiffened nose angled toward the dark water line. Then Marcus heard it too, faint, almost lost in the wind. A splash, heavy, slow. Not a fish, not a bird, not a tide shift. Something large displaced the water. A second splash followed closer. Something waiting. Marcus's throat tightened. He reached instinctively for the old shotgun hung above the pantry door, but Echo growled a low warning vibration and stepped between Marcus and the weapon. Don't shoot, Marcus whispered. Echo didn't break eye contact with the marsh. Whatever was out there, guns didn't matter. Marcus leaned down. Okay, no shooting. The air felt thick, heavy, almost electrically charged. Echo crept to the window and placed both paws on the sill, his body rising enough for him to peer outside. Marcus followed his gaze. The marsh grass swayed in chaotic patterns, erratic, not wind-driven. Something moved beneath the surface, something shifting the reeds with deliberate pulsing force. What are you? Marcus breathed. The water surged once, then settled as if whatever had disturbed it had sunk beneath the surface. Echo lowered himself, tail tucked. Marcus slowly exhaled. We need to leave it tonight. But both of them knew they wouldn't. He spent the next hour reading by lamplight, hoping to distract himself. It didn't work. Echo paced the small cabin in restless loops. Marcus placed a palm on the dog's flank as he passed. Echo paused, leaned in briefly, then resumed pacing. You want me awake, Marcus murmured. Echo's ears flicked back at him but didn't stop moving. Marcus returned to the binder. His father's handwriting filled every page, title analyses, field notes, cryptic shorthand. It took 3 read-throughs to track the progression. Early note stable pulses detected at low tide. Non-dangerous. Possibly natural pressure differentials. Mid-series notes pulses irregular. Unstable. Sediment shifts at depth, measuring higher than expected. Later notes. The phenomenon responds to external frequencies. Patterns suggest sensitivity to interference. Recommend immediate halt. Final notes. Something deeper than calculated. Not geological. Movement detected outside predicted vectors. Listening may be metaphorical or not. Marcus closed the binder, rubbing his eyes. Dad, what the hell were you part of? Echo whined. Marcus looked over. The dog stood rigid at the door, again, ears pinned. Still there? Marcus asked softly. Echo didn't move. Marcus pressed the heel of his palm to his forehead, feeling the ache creeping in. He stood, walked to the door, and laid a hand on the metal deadbolt. Show me, he whispered. Echo flicked his eyes to Marcus, then back to the marsh. Marcus cracked the door open just an inch. Cold air rushed in, thick with the scent of brine and something metallic and old. The hum returned, stronger. Marcus slammed the door shut, but the vibration stayed, this time traveling through the wood, through the window frames, through the old nails that held the cabin together. He staggered back. The lights flickered. Echo barked once sharp, commanding, breaking Marcus's stunned paralysis. Okay, Marcus said, breath ragged. We're doing this. He grabbed his jacket, flashlight, and a small crowbar. Echo pressed against the door, vibrating with nervous readiness. Marcus knelt, gripping the dog's harness. You stay with me. Don't get ahead, don't chase anything, don't break off. Echo inhaled sharply, tail firm, waiting for his next word. Close. Echo moved to Marcus's left flank and held position. They stepped into the night. The marsh trail was a slick ribbon of dark mud and flat, echoing water. Marcus kept his flashlight low, sweeping the ground. Echo walked in perfect sync beside him, ears swiveling toward every faint sound, every drip, ripple whisper of reeds brushing past each other. Halfway to the berm, Marcus stopped. The hum was gone. The marsh was silent. Too silent. He lifted the beam. The water rippled once broad circular, as though something wide had just submerged. Echo tensed hard, one paw lifting off the ground. Off, Marcus whispered. Echo held. Skill showcase #2 static tracking. Echo leaned forward slightly, nose pointed dead on toward the center of the ripple. The dog's breath slowed. His stance settled. He wasn't afraid. He was tracking something stationary beneath the water, where Marcus murmured. Echo angled his head 5 degrees left. Marcus lowered the flashlight in that direction. The beam landed on something pale in the dark water like a strip of bleached driftwood. Then it moved. Marcus took an instinctive step back, his heart slamming against his ribs. Echo braced against Marcus's knee, grounding him. The pale shape slipped beneath the water. Gone. Marcus forced himself forward. What the hell is under there? Echo growled deep, an almost human note of warning. Marcus kept walking. He had to. Every step felt wrong. Like the ground beneath him wasn't entirely soil, like something was flexing beneath the crust of the marsh. When they reached the berm, he froze. The hatch was open, barely an inch, maybe 2, enough for a sliver of blackness to show. Marcus's flashlight shook. I closed it. Echo crept forward, sniffing the seam. Then he froze, body-locked muscles, corded tail tucked. His nose twitched once, twice, and he whimpered. A tiny, terrified sound Marcus had heard only twice in the 2 years they'd been together. Marcus knelt. Talk to me. Echo backed up, pressing against Marcus so hard it nearly knocked him down. Marcus lifted the flashlight, angling it toward the crack. A faint sound drifted up, distant, watery, like something shifting gravel under pressure. The same sound he'd heard when the splash hit earlier. Oh, God, Marcus whispered. Something came up. He staggered back, gripping Echo's harness. Then, from far across the marsh, a new sound rose, a low siren, long, mournful, coming from the water. Echo barked sharply. Marcus whispered, We're not alone out here. The siren rolled over the marsh a second time, longer, louder, curling around Marcus's ribs like a cold hand. It wasn't a boat horn. He'd grown up with those sharp, functional blasts you could set your watch by. This sound rose from the water itself, low, and wavering, more vibration than note. Echo's bark broke into a high, frantic rhythm pause, skidding in the mud as he tried to pull Marcus back the way they'd come. Easy, Marcus said, though his voice shook. Easy, I'm here. The ground shuddered under his boots. Not a big movement. More like the marsh had cleared its throat. The shallow pools around the hatch rippled in tight concentric rings. The mud bulged once, twice, then flattened, as if something deep beneath it had pressed up, testing the surface tension. Echo yanked harder on his harness. All right, Marcus muttered. We're done. Back. Now. He turned, but the fog had thickened behind them, swallowing the trail in a gray curtain. The narrow path they had followed out was gone, just endless, flat, featureless, dark, punctured by the thin beam of his flashlight. For a second, his chest locked. Not again. Not another tunnel. Not another way in, and no way out. Echo reared up, hitting Marcus's hip with his shoulder, a sharp physical jolt that snapped his thoughts sideways. Right, Marcus rasped. You lead. Skill showcase #3, route finding. Marcus loosened his grip, giving Echo the slack he needed. The dog moved ahead, not bolting, not panicking, picking a path with careful, deliberate steps. He paused at every fork in the flattened reeds, sniffed once, then chose heading unerringly toward higher ground. Marcus followed, forcing his lungs to match Echo's rhythm. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Boot after boot in the prints, Echo left, trusting the dog's instincts when his own wanted to freeze. The siren sounded a third time, more distant, now further out toward the bay. The pulse under the marsh answered with a final, shiver-deep tremor. Then, stillness. The hum cut off as though someone had thrown a switch. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It felt like the pause after a question waiting for an answer. By the time they reached the cabin, Marcus's calves burned, and his hands ached from clutching the flashlight too tight. Echo bounded up the steps and spun, facing the marsh, breathing hard. Marcus fumbled the key at the lock. Twice. Echo bumped his leg each time, like a metronome steadying his hands. Got it, Marcus muttered, finally sliding the deadbolt home. Inside, the air felt stale despite the drafts. He shrugged off his jacket, damp at the collar, and hung it on its nail. Echo paced once around the room, inspecting each window, then settled, if you could call it that, at the back door, lying sphinx-like with his nose aimed at the marsh. Marcus's fingers still tingled. He went to the sink and let the tap run, splashing his face with water that tasted like old pipes and iron. It helped. A little. He caught his reflection in the dark window over the sink, eyes too wide, shoulders tight, the angle of his jaw exactly like the photos of his father in the binders. Great, he muttered. Already look like a guy they don't believe. He turned away before the thought could burrow too deep and went back to the table. The binder lay open where he'd left it, his father's tight blue script waiting in rows. He flipped to the pages he hadn't let himself read yet. Supplemental entry. Personal. We have confirmed the phenomenon is not spontaneous. Our pulses provoke it. No test, no response. Test again, the pattern returns. Stronger each time. The men joke about waking the dragon. They're not wrong. We are hammering on something in the dark without the faintest idea what it is. Marcus skimmed farther down until one phrase snagged him. Tonight I stood on the surface during a low-tide pulse. The ground under my boots rang. It felt like standing above a submarine running silent just below its engines, shuttered hull humming with residual power. The difference is with a submarine, someone knows who's in charge of it. Down there, I'm not sure anyone does, including us. Marcus leaned back, chair creaking. Echo's nails clicked as he shifted by the door, restless but quiet. Okay, Marcus said aloud. So they poked it. It poked back. And they kept going anyway. He rubbed at the tension, nodding the base of his skull. Which means either it's more stable than it feels, or they were idiots. He knew which way he leaned. He pulled his phone closer, thumb hovering over Opal's number, then sliding to the newer, untested one below it. Lena Jennings. He stared at the contact for a long second. Talking meant admitting this was bigger than the marsh. Bigger than his mortgage, bigger than his desire to simply lock the hatch and pretend Siren Deep had never been etched across his father's reports. Echo lifted his head eyes, tracking the small movement of Marcus's thumb. You're gonna glare at me if I don't call, aren't you? Marcus asked. Echo, being a dog, didn't answer, but he tilted his head just enough to make his point. Marcus exhaled. Fine. He tapped the number. 1 ring. 2. 3. Jennings, a woman's voice said, brisk professional, the faintest hint of New England in the vowels. Miss Jennings, Marcus said. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm Opal's bay rat, she said, with the dog. She told me you might call. She also told me not to let you hang up until I've at least heard the words Cold War and classified out of your mouth. So, make my day. Despite himself, Marcus's mouth twitched. I found a buried facility on my land, he said. Lab. Vault. Old signage says Siren Deep. My father's notes are all over it. The line went quiet. Static hissed gently in the gap. You're not joking, Lena said. I wish I were. And you opened it, she said slowly. Of course you did. What's happening now? Echo stood and drifted closer, pressing his head against Marcus's thigh. Marcus dropped a hand into the fur without looking. Pulses, he said. In the ground. In the water. Dead fish. Some sort of response under the marsh. And a couple of people with a badge I don't recognize showed up asking very polite questions. Describe the badge, Lena said. He did. She swore under her breath, the sound muffled. That bad, Marcus asked. Coastal hazards is real, but that wing isn't, she said. It's a convenient label they slap on anything messy near the shore. Gives them an excuse to show up with clipboards instead of uniforms. Them who, Marcus asked. Silence again. Then grudgingly, people who like their projects black and their budgets bigger than God's. You're sure it said Siren Deep? I'm holding the binders right now, Marcus said. Unless my father had a really specific sense of humor, this isn't a coincidence. Echo's ears flicked at the slight edge in his tone. What do you want from me? Lena asked, not unkindly. I'm a reporter, Mr. Hale. I chase paper and calls. I don't do ghosts in the marsh. I want to know what they did after this place shut down, Marcus said. Where it went, who inherited it. And if I find out, she said. What then? Marcus opened his mouth. Then we expose them. Then we burn it down. The thoughts flickered hot and fizzled just as fast against the memory of the dead fish on the gravel and the way the floor had answered his father's voice. If we light this up too fast, we might make it worse, he said slowly. All I know is whatever Siren Deep woke up back then, it isn't gone. On the other end of the line, Lena let out a long breath. You're saying it's still active, she said. I'm saying it reacts, Marcus replied. To sound, to pulses, to recordings. And now it knows we're talking about it. Echo shifted his weight, leaning into Marcus like he was trying to keep him pinned to the chair. Opal says you're not crazy, Lena said. And I trust her more than most doctors I've ever met. I'll dig, carefully. You do one thing for me. What's that? Don't go back down there alone again, she said. Whatever's humming under your feet, it's had 60 years to practice. You haven't. Before he could answer, a faint metallic pop echoed from somewhere under the kitchen like a distant breaker tripping. The lights dimmed, flared, then steadied. Echo's hackles rose. Marcus Lena's voice sharpened. "What was that?" he swallowed. "That's my cue to get off the line. Do not hang up on me if you're about to." He ended the call, killed the screen, and listened. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the mugs above the sink clinked together, a soft chime. Echo moved to the center of the room, planting his paws wide, head low. The hum returned. Not a background murmur this time. A defined rising tone building from somewhere deep in the earth, pushing up through the pilings, the joists, the bones of the house. Marcus's vision narrowed. The last time he'd felt this, he'd been in a concrete bunker, sand pouring from cracks in the ceiling, a radio squawking something about secondary collapse. His lungs had locked then, too. Echo slammed his shoulder into Marcus's knees. Marcus stumbled, caught himself on the edge of the table, and dragged his mind back by the scruff. Not there, he told himself. Here. The hum climbed another notch, just shy of painful, a pressure more than a sound. The tape recorder on the table vibrated. The old reels inside it twitched. Marcus stared. "Don't," he whispered to the machine, to the house, to the marsh outside. "Don't answer it. Don't play it." The recorder, being an inanimate object, didn't care what he wanted. With a soft click, the play button depressed on its own. The spools began to turn. Echo barked short, panicked. His father's voice spilled into the charged air, thin and warbly from age. "If something happens to me. If it's sudden, it wasn't." The floor boomed under their feet. A single heavy knock from below that rattled the dishes and made Marcus's teeth snap together. The hum spiked. Echo lunged, teeth closing around the power cord of the recorder, yanking it from the wall in one savage jerk. The machine died, mid-sentence reels still spinning down. The hum eased. Just a fraction. Marcus stared at the dead recorder, then at his dog. "You're right," he said hoarsely. "We're not alone out here." He looked at the floor. "And I don't think we're the only ones listening either." Echo settled between him and the boards, eyes fixed on the invisible thing below, breath steady, muscles ready. Outside, somewhere in the gray distance of the marsh, the low siren sounded again, long, mournful, impossibly far and uncomfortably close. Waiting. For whatever they would do next. The tapping stopped as abruptly as it began. Echo's growl faded into a tight, unsettled whine, his tail held rigidly low. Marcus stayed frozen near the window, breath shallow, flashlight trembling in his grip. The marsh was a smear of gray and black beyond the glass. Nothing moved. No reeds shifting. No ripples. No shadow crossing the thin line of water. But the air had changed, like static waiting for a spark. "Okay," Marcus murmured. "New rule. We don't react on instinct." Echo pressed against his leg again, grounding him with quiet insistence. The steady pressure helped. Not much, but enough. Marcus stepped back from the window. "We need to confirm what it heard," he said mostly, to convince himself he had a plan. Echo watched him carefully. He approached the digital recorder's cracked remains on the table. The memory card now sat safely in his laptop, but the casing, dented, muddy, crushed, told its own story. Whatever had stepped on it hadn't left tracks, or scent, or any sign Echo could follow, which meant two possibilities. Someone else had been out there, or the anomaly was capable of interacting with the surface in ways that weren't normal. Neither option felt survivable. Marcus ran a thumb along the cracked plastic. "If it reacted to my voice, that means it's distinguishing patterns, recognizing inputs." Echo's ears pricked. Marcus didn't like the next thought, didn't like it at all, but the idea lodged itself in his mind anyway. What else was it recognizing? He reached for the laptop and dragged the audio file across the screen, stopping at the waveform spike where the hum spiked after hearing him speak. He replayed the segment, volume low. "You sing, I'll listen later." Hum shift. Waveform swell. Frequency rise. Echo stiffened at the sound ears flattening. Marcus stopped playback immediately. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Echo retreated 2 paces, as if the speaker itself gave off the wrong kind of heat. "It's not just reacting after the fact," Marcus said quietly. "It's echoing." Echo blinked slowly at the word, as if offended by the implication. "No, not you," Marcus added quickly. "The real Echo." He paced once across the small kitchen, trying to burn off the rising tightness in his chest. "Focus. Don't spiral. You're here, not there." He braced both palms against the counter. "Dad said it was responding." "But he never said it was initiating," Marcus said. "That's new." Echo padded over and sat at Marcus's left side, leaning into his thigh with his full weight. Warm, solid, real. Marcus steadied his breathing. Okay, he exhaled. We test something safe. Something small. He took his phone, opened the recording app not to capture anything, but to play something back. Echo tilted his head uncertain. It's fine, Marcus said. We're not broadcasting. Just checking. He scrolled through his saved files until he found one from 3 months ago, a mundane clip of him reading a tide table while Echo snored on the couch. No rhythmic phrases, no commands. Nothing that resembled the marsh side recording. He pressed play. His own voice filled the room in gentle, muffled tones. Low tide at 3:47. Echo didn't react. The mugs didn't clink. The floor didn't hum. Marcus stopped the playback. Good, he said, exhaling. So it's not any sound of mine. He replayed the marsh clip again, only for a second. Echo bristled instantly. The mugs clinked softly. The floor vibrated under Marcus's boots. He shut it off. That's it. Marcus swallowed. It's responding to the context, not the voice, the place, the ground resonance, maybe even the emotion behind it. He sank onto a chair. Dad, what did you start? Echo pressed his chin onto Marcus's knee. Marcus stroked the dog's head mechanically, his mind racing. He needed more information. Data points, patterns. Anything to stop feeling like the marsh was 2 steps ahead of him. His phone buzzed. Lena. He answered immediately. What do you have? Not enough to calm you, she said. Papers rustled in the background. I dug up a mention in an old Department of Defense audit. Siren Deep wasn't originally a biology program. It was acoustic geotech, resonance mapping, seafloor stress testing. That matches Dad's notes, Marcus said. The pulses. Right, Lena continued. But then the budget doubled, and the program wasn't moved, it was buried. You don't double a budget on a project you're shutting down. You bury it if it found something you don't want anyone touching. Marcus's stomach turned. What kind of something, he asked. That's the part they scrubbed, she said. Every archive document references a subsurface anomaly with no classification code. That's rare. If it were biological, it would have had a biohazard tag. If geological, there'd be seismic classifications. This had neither, meaning what Marcus whispered. Meaning it didn't fit any category, Lena said softly. And unless your father's team lied about their findings, whatever they detected wasn't behaving like rock, or sediment, or gas pockets. Marcus's knuckles whitened on the edge of the chair. Echo watched him closely, sensing the spike of fear. Marcus, Lena continued, voice tighter. Now, the pattern you described, the ground pulse following your voice, that's not geological. He already knew that. Hearing it aloud didn't help. What do I do? He asked. A long pause. Get distance, she said. Any distance. Even 100 yards. If it's keying to your presence, you need to break the loop before it reinforces. Marcus looked at Echo. The dog's body was angled toward the floor, muscles coiled. Leaving meant walking away from the cabin, from the binders, from the hatch. Leaving meant creating a vacuum. And he didn't know what would fill it. I can't leave it unsupervised, Marcus said. If it escalates, staying on top of it won't save you, Lena snapped. Get distance. The sudden sharpness in her voice hit him harder than the words. But she wasn't finished. And Marcus? Yeah. If it's learning you, don't give it anything else to learn. The line went dead. Marcus lowered the phone. Echo took a step back, then forward, then back again, torn between guarding the door and guarding Marcus himself. Distance, Marcus repeated. He looked at his keys on the hook. The boat. It would get him out onto the open water far enough that the marsh couldn't pull the ground out from under him. Maybe far enough to break whatever feedback loop he'd created. He grabbed his jacket. Echo's stiffened tail rising anxiously. We're not going for a ride, Marcus said. We're breaking a pattern. Echo trotted to the door, blocking it with his body. Marcus knelt in front of him. I'm not leaving you, he whispered. Not ever. But if I don't step back, this thing isn't going to stop. Echo's breathing hitched a soft, distressed sound. Marcus rested his forehead against the dog's. You brought me out of the worst hole of my life. Let me try to keep both of us out of this one. Echo licked his cheek once, slow, resigned. Then he stepped aside. Marcus opened the door. A gust of cold air swept in, carrying that faint metallic scent again. Echo growled low and steady. Marcus whispered, Yeah, I smell it too. The marsh wasn't humming, it was waiting. And he had no choice but to walk into that waiting silence and hope he was doing the right damn thing. The dock groaned under Marcus's boots, the planks wet from mist and tide. Echo trotted beside him, pressed so close their steps blended into one rhythm. The sky was a smear of gray, neither night nor dawn, an in-between hour when even the bay seemed unsure whether to breathe. Marcus unhooked the rope, pulled the small skiff toward him, and stepped in. Echo hesitated on the dock paws planted at the edge. "You're coming," Marcus said quietly. "I'm not doing this alone." Echo gave a small, guttural sound, half warning, half protest, and then leaped lightly into the boat, landing beside Marcus. "Good boy." Marcus pushed off. The water accepted the skiff without a splash. The marsh behind them blurred as fog curled in from both sides, turning the world to shifting gray walls. For a moment it was peaceful. Then Marcus felt it, a subtle tightening in his chest. Like someone lifting a weight he hadn't realized was sitting on his ribs. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. Echo's ears flicked, but his breath steadied. The dog wasn't locked on high alert anymore, just watchful. The further they got from the marsh, the more the pressure receded. "Lena was right," Marcus murmured. "Distance helps." He eased the engine into a low hum, guiding the skiff toward open bay. The water beneath them vibrated lightly from the motor ripples radiating out in soft rings. When they reached a point where the marsh looked like a smudge on the horizon, Marcus cut the engine. Silence. Real silence. Not the charged waiting kind. Just quiet. Echo let out a breath and lay down fully, chin on his paws. The tension in his back finally loosened. Marcus leaned on the side of the boat, letting his lungs fill with clean, cold air. For the first time since the hatch opened, he didn't feel watched. He pulled out his phone and checked the signal. 1 bar. Enough. He dialed Lena. She picked up on the second ring. "Tell me you got distance." "I did," Marcus said. "Out on the water." Echo's calmer. "The ground pressure's gone." "Then stay out there," Lena said. "For at least 30 minutes. Longer if you can." "I'm not camping offshore," Marcus muttered. "Didn't ask you to," she replied. "But whatever's happening in that marsh, it's attuning to your proximity. Think of it like feedback in a speaker system. You stay too close, you get a loop. You step back, you break the loop." Marcus drummed his fingers on the metal railing. "You keep saying it. You think this is a biological entity." "I don't know what it is," Lena said. "But I know what it isn't. It's not a simple geological pressure, it's not a trapped gas pocket, and it's not mechanical. Nothing mechanical stays active for 60 years without power or maintenance." Marcus bit the inside of his cheek. What if the marsh is responding to a pattern my father set up, echoing it, mimicking it, and now it's tracking me because I sound similar? "That's not impossible," Lena said quietly. "I've seen acoustic phenomena hold patterns longer than expected, but none of them behaved like this." Echo raised his head ears, turning sharply toward the distant shoreline. Marcus stiffened. "Echo sees something." "What?" Lena asked. He stood, cupping a hand over his eyes. Through the fog, something faint glimmered on the marsh edge. A dull metallic flicker. Not a flashlight. Not a reflection. More like a pulse. A soft, rhythmic glow rising and falling. Marcus swallowed hard. "There's light on shore." "What kind of light?" He didn't answer immediately. He watched it, 3 soft flashes. Pause. 3 more. Lena exhaled sharply. "Morse." "Yeah." "Who's signaling you?" Marcus shook his head, though he knew she couldn't see it. "It's coming from the hatch area. There shouldn't be anyone there." Echo stood, body angled toward the marsh tail, straight as a rod. The lights blinked again. 3, 3, 3. "Too deliberate to be natural," Marcus whispered. "It knows I moved." "Marcus, get back," Lena said sharply. "Right now. Back away." "I can't leave it," Marcus argued. "If it's signaling, you're not responsible for answering," she snapped. "Don't give it a feedback loop. Don't give it more to learn. Distance is your only advantage here." Marcus gripped the wheel. His instinct screamed to go back to confirm what he was seeing, to guard the hatch, to stop whatever was pulsing under there from escalating. But another voice rose, a quieter one, the one he'd spent years trying to bury. "You ignored the warning once, Hale. Don't do it again." Echo nudged him hard once, twice, then let out a sharp bark pointed back toward deeper water. A command, not a plea. Marcus inhaled a shuddering breath. Okay. He powered the engine back on. The pulses from the marsh flickered faster, more insistent, as if protesting. "Hang up," Lena said abruptly. The signal could carry back. Marcus ended the call. The engine's growl grew louder as the skiff pushed farther from shore. Echo kept his gaze locked on the marsh until it disappeared into fog entirely. Marcus didn't look back, not for a full 30 minutes. When they returned, the tide had shifted. The narrow trail back to the cabin was slick, and uneven reeds bent low, as though something heavy had moved through them. Marcus froze halfway up the path. Echo's nose shot into the air. In the mud before them, a clean, perfect circle the size of a dinner plate. Smooth edges. No footprints leading to it. no footprints leading away, just a shallow, downward-pressed ring in the earth, as if something had rested there. Then, another circle, and another. A trail of them leading directly to the cabin porch. Not human, not animal, not anything with legs. Echo growled low, stepping protectively in front of Marcus. Marcus whispered, "It came to the house." He knelt slowly, touching the nearest circle. The mud was cold. Too cold, as if heat had been sucked out of it. Echo, his voice nearly failed him. This wasn't pressure from below, this was weight, something on the surface. The dog pressed close, trembling, not from fear but from tightly contained readiness. The circles ascended the porch steps, straight to the door. Marcus's breath shook. This wasn't a reaction, it was escalation. He stood pulse climbing again, but his mind was crystal clear in a way it hadn't been all night. This was the midpoint, the part where the investigation stopped being a search for answers and became a countdown. Echo nudged him toward the cabin. Marcus unlocked the door slowly. Inside, the entire cabin felt wrong, cold, still air heavier than it should be, as if something had pressed inside and then retreated. Marcus whispered to Echo, "Whatever's under that marsh, it's not staying under anymore." Echo settled at his heel-tail, rigid eyes fixed on the floor. The hum didn't start, the floor didn't move. That was somehow worse. Stillness meant intent. Stillness meant planning. Stillness meant waiting. And he knew without understanding how that the marsh now understood something about him it hadn't before, that he'd run, which meant next time, it would close the distance faster. The stillness inside the cabin thickened until it felt like a presence in the room. Not loud, not obvious, but there, a pressure behind the silence waiting for him to move first. Echo sat rigid at Marcus's heel gaze, nailed to the floorboards as if watching something on the other side. Marcus exhaled slowly, trying to steady the tremor in his chest. "Echo," he whispered, "we're not outrunning this." "Not anymore." The dog didn't blink. Marcus grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. The sleeves were still damp from fog, and the cold fabric snapped his nerves hard enough to focus him. He clipped Echo's harness tight, secure, no slack. The dog braced, expecting a command. Close, Marcus murmured. Echo moved to his left flank immediately. Marcus opened the door. A breath of cold air rolled in, carrying a smell he now recognized too well, metallic, old, like rusted machinery buried for decades. Echo's hackles rose in a smooth wave. The porch boards beneath their feet vibrated. Marcus froze mid-step. A pulse, faint, nearly gentle, rolled up through the wood and into his bones, as if the marsh were acknowledging his decision to step outside. He swallowed hard. It's not waiting anymore. Echo's chest rumbled in a growl. Marcus stepped into the fog. The marsh trail was a slick ribbon through the reeds, the kind of terrain nobody walked at night unless they had good reason. Tonight Marcus had several, and none of them were good. The pulsing beneath the ground followed their pace. Not every step, not a steady rhythm, but enough to say it was tracking. Echo held formation perfectly, head-low muscles, coiled tail, a tense line of warning. "We're going to the hatch," Marcus said under his breath. "If it's coming up, then that's where it'll be weakest. Pressure point, or fault line, or..." He didn't finish. Echo didn't expect him to. Fog closed in, swallowing the edges of the marsh until there was no horizon, just faint ripples of black water and a ghostly outline of reeds bending under their own dew. Halfway down the trail, Echo stopped dead. Marcus halted instantly, his heart hammered. What Echo's ears rotated like radar dishes. His nose angled downward, then forward, not toward the hatch, but toward the narrow strip of water cutting through the marsh like a vein. Marcus shone his light. The water was still. Too still. He crouched, watching the surface. A ripple shivered outward from the center. Not from motion overhead. Not from wind. From below. "Okay," Marcus whispered. "We keep moving." But Echo didn't move. The dog leaned back into Marcus's legs, not refusing, not resisting, but warning him. A second ripple crossed the water. Then a third. Then the water stilled, as if whatever was beneath had repositioned. Marcus swallowed. It's not under the hatch anymore. He turned slowly, scanning the marsh edge. He didn't see anything, but he felt it, that subtle atmospheric pressure, the kind that made his ears want to pop, the kind that wasn't about sound but about presence. They were not alone. "Echo," he whispered. "We shift course." He guided them toward the higher ground, bordering the hatch site, the only dry berm wide enough to stand on without sinking into mud. Echo obeyed, though every step radiated tension. When they reached the crest, Marcus finally saw it. The hatch was open. Not cracked, not shifted, open. The steel lid lay flat against the mud, pushed aside like a dinner plate. The opening yawned black and wet rim, dripping with water that shimmered in the flashlight's beam. Marcus felt cold bloom at the base of his spine. He had sealed that hatch. He had stacked rocks over it. It didn't matter. Something beneath had simply lifted the entire door and set it aside. Echo whined softly, not fear but urgency. He planted himself in front of Marcus, stance-squared front paws braced. Marcus knelt beside him. "We can't go down," he said softly. "We're not equipped, and I'm not dragging you into that tunnel." Echo turned his head, looking straight at Marcus. The dog made a low sound, a disagreement. "No," Marcus whispered. "I'm not risking you for this." Echo looked back at the hatch. A faint vibration rippled through the mud around the opening. Marcus staggered to his feet. Something was coming up. Not fast, not sudden, deliberate, measured. Echo's growl lowered in pitch until it was almost a vibration itself. Fog curled downward into the hatch, as if pulled by a vacuum. The air chilled several degrees. Marcus's breath puffed white. A sound rose, a deep, resonant hum that made Marcus's ribs ache. Not mechanical, not natural. A frequency, a signature, almost inquisitive. Marcus's hands shook. "It recognizes me." The hum wavered. Echo barked sharp, explosive, instinct-driven. The hum stopped. Marcus blinked. "Echo, it reacted to you." The dog took a step forward, tail raised, body squared directly over the hatch entrance. Marcus grabbed his harness. "Easy, I'm not letting you." A new sound rose. A liquid shift of sediment. A pressurized exhale from deep within the earth. Marcus froze. The hum restarted, but higher, sharper, jittering at the edges. Not inquisitive now. Searching. Calling. For him. Marcus's throat tightened. "It's tracking my voice pattern," which meant, if he kept speaking, it would come all the way up. It would surface. And he didn't know what would happen then. Echo turned sharply and bumped Marcus's leg hard enough to jar him. The message was clear: stop talking. Marcus shut his mouth. The hum faltered. Echo barked again, sharp and commanding. The hum shifted direction, following Echo's sound instead of Marcus's. Holy Marcus stopped himself. The hum rose. Echo barked again. The hum responded to Echo. The realization hit Marcus like a punch. The anomaly wasn't attuned to humans. It was attuned to patterns. And Echo's bark was a pattern it couldn't interpret. A pattern that confused it. A pattern that disrupted its lock on Marcus. Marcus whispered, "You're breaking its signal." Echo barked a third time louder. The hum glitched, a sudden drop, like a sonar ping that had hit a wall. The mud around the hatch buckled. A swelling pressure surged from below. Echo lunged sideways, slamming his body into Marcus's hip, the same trained intervention technique he used during Marcus's panic attacks. They hit the ground as the hatch exploded upward. Not in a violent blast, but in a rolling surge of air and cold and force that sent reeds bending flat against the mud. A column of vapor burst from the opening, spiraling into the fog. The hum tore upward with it, deafening resonant, a vibration that rattled Marcus's teeth. Echo planted himself between Marcus and the hatch stance, lowered teeth, bared, barking into the roar. Marcus shielded his ears. The hum built, peaked, fractured, then collapsed into silence. The vapor dispersed. The marsh stilled. Marcus lay gasping on the mud, Echo still braced in front of him like a wall of fur and muscle. When his hearing cleared, he realized something. The pulses beneath the earth had stopped. Completely. The hatch entrance was a pool of still black water. Whatever had tried to surface had retreated, driven back. Because of Echo. Marcus crawled to the dog and wrapped both arms around his neck. Echo's breath was hot, an urgent body trembling with exertion. "You did it," Marcus whispered into his fur. "You stopped it. You pushed it back." He wasn't entirely sure whether the anomaly was defeated or simply disrupted, but it had retreated because it lost the pattern lock, because Echo had broken the loop. Marcus held him tighter. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I shouldn't have pulled you into this. But, God, I'm glad you were here." Echo nudged into him, breathing slow. Marcus looked at the open hatch, fog curling around its edges. The threat wasn't gone, but the escalation had stopped, and something else had shifted too deep inside Marcus, a clarity sharp and painful. This wasn't just about his father's mistakes, or the facility, or the anomaly. It was about him. He'd been running for years, from combat, from memory, from guilt. Tonight he'd run again, and Echo had stopped him. "Okay," Marcus whispered. "No more running. We finish this. Not to fight it, but to contain it." He straightened and pulled out his phone. Lena answered with a shaky, "Please, tell me you're alive." "We're alive," Marcus said. "But this thing, it tried to surface." "God," Lena breathed. "Marcus, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Marcus said softly. Echo did. He looked at the dog, at the steady eyes, the grounded posture, the fierce protectiveness. "It responds to my patterns," he said. But Echo interrupts them. He can break the loop. Lena was silent for a long time. "Marcus, you realize what that means." He already did. He wasn't the shield in this fight. Echo was. And Marcus had a new goal clearer than anything. Since the day he'd left Afghanistan, he would keep Echo alive. No matter what. No matter what the marsh wanted. "Lena," he said quietly, "we need to seal the hatch permanently. Concrete, steel, whatever it takes. I'll call in favors," she said. "Not official channels, people who actually care, not people who buried this. But Marcus, this isn't over. I know." He ended the call. Echo nudged the back of his hand. "Yeah," Marcus murmured, voice thick. "Let's go home." They walked back through the fog, the marsh quiet behind them. No pulses, no hum, no watching presence. The circles in the mud by the cabin remained, but no new ones had appeared. Inside, the cabin's warmth hit him like a blessing. Marcus sank to the floor beside Echo, leaning against the dog's sturdy shoulder. The sun was rising, a thin orange edge over the bay. The world looked fragile in that first light. So Marcus whispered, "You saved my life again." Echo exhaled a long, warm breath and rested his head on Marcus's knee. Marcus looked out the window at the marsh that held his father's secrets, at the hatch that held something older than any of them. It wasn't gone, but it was contained. And for the first time in years, maybe in his whole life, Marcus felt the weight inside his chest lift. Not because the danger had ended, but because he wasn't facing it alone. "Come on," he said, patting Echo gently. "Let's get some rest." Echo followed him to the couch, curled beside him, and let out a satisfied sigh. Marcus closed his eyes. Whatever tomorrow brought, the anomaly, the investigations, the sealing, the truth, he would meet it head-on. With Echo. Always with Echo. And somewhere deep beneath the marsh, in a cavern of black water and forgotten steel, the anomaly settled back into stillness. Not defeated, not dead, just quiet. Listening to a pattern, it would never fully understand the pattern of a man who finally stopped running and the dog who taught him how. Dawn crept slowly across the marsh, turning the reeds gold and the water to tarnished silver. The sun didn't rise so much as unfold, thinning the fog from the surface in long, delicate ribbons. For the first time in days, Marcus watched it without tension in his jaw. He stood on the porch with a mug of cooling coffee, Echo pressed against his leg the way he always did after long nights. The dog wasn't anxious anymore. He wasn't pacing or scanning or vibrating with that tuned frequency of dread. He simply existed, present, grounded, calm. Marcus let that calmness seep into him. He didn't rush it, didn't force it. Simply let himself stand in the new light, breathing in a world that suddenly felt wider. The marsh hummed faintly beneath everything, the kind of natural hum he'd grown up with, the one that pulsed through the water when currents shifted. Not the anomaly. Not that charged, inexplicable presence. Just ordinary tide breath. Ordinary earth. For the first time, the ordinary felt extraordinary. Echo nudged his knee, a quiet reminder he wasn't alone in the moment. Marcus knelt, rubbing the dog's ears. "You kept me alive," he whispered. "Not just last night. Before that, too. More times than I can count." Echo's tail brushed the porch, once slow and steady. "You know," Marcus murmured, "I used to think I had to handle everything myself. That I didn't get to be afraid. That if I ever slowed down, something would catch up." The dog's warm weight pressed against him in answer. "But you," Marcus swallowed, voice tightening, "you didn't let it catch me." Echo leaned his head against Marcus's chest. Marcus closed his eyes. "Maybe that's the real lesson," he said softly. "Maybe we don't survive because we're strong. Maybe we survive because someone refuses to let us fall." The dog huffed, gently agreeable. Marcus looked back at the marsh, calmer now, but not empty. The hatch would be sealed soon. Lena's team would handle it with the kind of quiet competence only people who understood danger truly possessed. There would be no headlines, no officials, no press conference. That was fine. The truth didn't need cameras. Sometimes the truth just needed accountability, and sometimes it needed distance. Marcus took a slow, deliberate breath. "I can't pretend this is over. Something down there still exists. It still knows me. Maybe it always will." Echo's gaze followed his. "But it didn't win," Marcus said. "Because we faced it. Together." He stood slowly, stretching the stiffness from his back. Echo rose with him. The marsh wind shifted, rustling the reeds like a whisper. But this time Marcus didn't tense. He didn't flinch at shadows or brace for the ground to tremble. He simply listened and let it pass. He opened the cabin door. Echo trotted inside tail, brushing Marcus's leg on the way in. The small domestic ritual coffee, morning light, the soft sigh of a dog settling on the rug felt like a victory all its own. Before stepping in after him, Marcus glanced once more at the horizon. Not to check for danger, not to measure the distance of pursuit, but to acknowledge the place where everything had changed, where he had changed. Then he whispered something he hadn't said aloud in a very long time. Thank you. He wasn't speaking to the marsh, or the anomaly, or the ghost of his father's mistakes. He was speaking to Echo, to loyalty that never hesitated, to courage that never asked for permission, to the quiet, grounding presence that had held him together when the world tried to pull him apart. Marcus stepped inside and closed the door behind them. Outside, the marsh exhaled with the tide. Inside, Echo rested his head on Marcus's knee. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt something simple and real settle in his chest, peace.